What is the correct and most successful way to build a football team? I'm going to explain this to you in this video, and let's start it right now. Welcome back to another video here on the Washington Football Maniacs YouTube channel. My name is Greg, and this channel is dedicated to the Washington Commanders. And if you're down with that, please make sure you have subscribed to this channel. And when you do, make sure you also hit that notification bell so you will know when another video has been released. Usually we try to release these videos in the evenings around the 6:30 time slot, but sometimes we also release videos during the day as well. So it's good that you have that notification bell checked so you will know and be notified when the Maniacs release a video. So there's been a lot of talk on the social media and the interwebs about how do you actually build a football team into a successful franchise, and what is the best way to go about it? Well, I have some ideas that I feel like are the best way. And when I talk about building a franchise, let's start with the front office and work our way to the actual team itself. And for me, I've been watching football for, well, honestly, since the early 1980s, which is weird because I'm only 26 years old. Okay, I'm a little bit older than that. But the thing is that what I've noticed with successful franchises is that they seem to be able to build their front office a very traditional way that I feel like has always worked best. And the way that I see that is usually is a general manager or someone that is over football operations, like a vice president of football operations, that usually is solely in charge of building out the front office, which means being able to oversee filling out the right scouting department, getting the right people in there in those positions as well, and then of course finding the right head coach to coach your team. And to not only that, but have the head coach who knows how to find the right guys to surround himself as far as his coaching staff. So to me, I think that starts with you've got to be able to find the right general manager. And I feel like Josh Harris and his regime, I think, is going to do this, because one thing that I have been very impressed with Josh Harris is that he's going with the analytics. And I feel like this is something that has not been done before in Washington. You know, by hiring somebody like Eugene Shen, who is, the vice president of football strategy and analytics, he's going to be somebody who's going to be able to tell you this is the best person, or this is the best situation as far as candidates, as far as even down to the analytics tells you this is the right type of plays you need to call during this point. I mean, he's going to be involved in a lot of stuff, but he's also going to be involved with helping to find the general manager. And so being able to use those analytics to go and find the next general manager, I think that's going to be very important. Now, we don't know if it's going to be called a general manager or, vice president or president of football operations. I don't think it really matters at that point. But I know that Harris went out and he spoke. They said that he wants to mirror the Washington Commanders franchise after the Baltimore Ravens. And so if that's the case, you're going to want to find somebody that is going to be a very successful general manager. And so once you get that general manager in place, you want to make sure you get the highest quality scouts in there. Whether if it's the scouts that you're able to retain, or if it's new people that you want to bring aboard, you want the best people for those positions. Once you get your front office in that position, then the general manager is the one who usually is responsible for going out and hiring the next head coach. Now, it doesn't mean that the ownership is completely hands off. The ownership needs to sign off, but the ownership more or less is going to give the general manager and company every opportunity to get this right. And the general manager is going to be somebody who's going to believe in analytics. That's who they're going to look for because of Eugene Chin. And so if they're going out looking at the analytics and looking at candidates based on the analytics, they're going to bring those people in and they're going to interview those people. And based on the analytics and based on the interview process, they're going to hopefully find the best coaching staff. They're going to find the best head coach who hopefully is going to bring on the best coaching staff to surround him. That's one thing that has to be very important with this head coach. It isn't just the head coach himself. He has to be able to bring on a very effective and very supportive cast of head coaches, or not head coaches, but assistant coaches and position coaches, people that are going to be on his same page, that has his same view, the same philosophies, and basically they all have to be on the same page. And so you got to be able to have a coaching staff like that. And I think it's very important that you give that coach the opportunity to find his coaching staff. And then once that is done, then it comes down to building the actual team. Now, that's where we really start to get into the bread and butter. And yes, we're already 7 minutes into this video. And this is where you really want to find out is, how do you build the actual team itself? What is the best way? In my opinion, and I know this is just my opinion, but I feel like that football starts in the trenches. It always has. And I feel like you always have to build from the inside out. You start with finding the highest quality offensive linemen and defensive linemen that you can find. Because on offense, your offense is not going to work unless you have the guys up front who can give you the best pass protection, can give you those big open run lanes for your running attacks. But not only that, an offensive line that can all think the same, that can all be on the same wavelength. That was the one thing that we had back in the 80s with Hogs. They all were on the same wavelength. They all knew where to go, how to help each other out when they were blocking. It wasn't just their assignment. They knew how to handle their assignment, but they also knew how to help out and where to go to help out the guy next to them when those guys needed help. And that's how that they were so successful. It wasn't just doing their one assignment and that was it. So you need to have guys like that who are so highly intelligent that they know how to, A, do their assignment, and B, they know how to help out the guys next to them in order to work as one well-oiled unit. And I think the other thing with that is a highly intelligent center who knows how to pick up on protections, who knows how to call the protections, and knows how to keep the quarterback in line with that, because the quarterback needs to rely on his center to be able to call the right protections, because if not, that's going to blow up your play right from the get-go. And honestly, it's not going to help you one bit if you have a porous offensive line whom the center doesn't know how to call the right protections. Your plays are never going to get off, especially if you have a quarterback who is inconsistent or who is as young and inexperienced. He relies heavily on an experienced center who knows how to call the right protections and all of that. And if that center is not good with that, then your offense is never going to have a chance to really be successful. So it all starts up at front on your offensive line. Defense, same thing. You need a stout defensive line because, again, if you're able to get a good pass rush on the quarterback, you're able to stuff runs, and you're able to get all of that pressure up front, then it is just going to make life hard for the quarterback that you're opposing. It's going to make things a lot easier for coverage, for your linebackers, for your secondary. And so it starts up front. If you're able to get a good pass rush with, depending on what base defense that you're in, if it's a 4-3 or a 3-4, your front 3 or 4 guys, you need to be able to make sure that you have a stout defensive front. And it starts with getting that in the trenches. Those guys who can stuff up those lanes and those gaps, and to be able to keep from the other team being able to get easy run plays, to keep from the quarterback being able to get into a good rhythm, to be able to have time to read through his progressions. So it all starts up front. And I think after that, if you want to stay on defense, we'll stay on defense. Then that's when you build out to the linebacking crew, because that is just as important. I think that is like 1B when it comes to the defense. That linebacker core has to be able to be the last line of defense for any running backs that are able to get past your defensive line. They got to be able to go up there and stuff up those run lanes. Also, they got to be able to be good linebackers that can come up and blitz, or they can drop back in coverage. They can cover those tight ends. Maybe sometimes they're able to even drop back and cover a wide receiver that is coming across and a crossing pattern if they have to. But they're one of the most versatile positions. They're also, the Mike, he's the quarterback of the defense. So he's got to be able to know and recognize the offensive plays and formations and be able to get the whole defense in the right play to counter. And so it's very important. That linebacking position is probably the most important position, I would say, on that defense. And if you don't get that right, I don't think that your defense is going to be very successful. And I think that's one thing that has really hurt the Commanders in recent years, is we just have not had the strongest, the best people there in that linebacker position, especially in the Mike, to be able to make that defense really be where it should have been. And, of course, finally rounding that out is your secondary, having good shutdown corners, having a good safety men who are able to drop back in coverage, whether if it's zone coverage or whatever, or being able to help double team some superstar wide receivers. And depending on your corners, are they good shutdown corners? Are they able to play man coverage really well, or are they more zone coverage corners? You got to be able to know that, because that's very important as far as what type of defense that you play. If you're more of the defensive coordinator that likes to play a combination of man and zone coverage, then you need at least one good shutdown corner that is able to play man coverage, like a Revis type of corner that can be the one playing the man, and you got your other corner on the other side that's playing zone coverage. So you can't have just zone guys out there and try to convert them into playing man. A lot of times it doesn't work. You're going to see them get burnt. And I think we didn't have anybody on our team this past year who was able to really play man coverage. We were hoping that Emmanuel Forbes was going to be that guy, but he just wasn't. We could argue that he just never really had help because guys were out of position a lot. But at the same time, I just think that they expected way too much out of Forbes in his first year. Then again, he was drafted in the first round, so what do you expect? So if we hop back on the offensive side of things, We covered the offensive line. Certainly quarterback is one of the most important positions on that offense. And so you have to find a good franchise quarterback. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that that quarterback has to be Tom Brady, or we go back in time to Joe Montana, or Dan Marino, or anybody like that. But I mean, it's great if that quarterback winds up being a franchise quarterback who could someday be the GOAT. But you need to have a quarterback who is going to be consistently the guy that's going to be on your team for year in and year out, that knows the offense, that can be able to read defenses, that's going to be able to check your offense out of bad plays, that's going to be able to go read through his progression, that has the timing down, that knows how to get the ball out of his hands quickly. I mean, you got to be able to have a good quarterback like that. This is a quarterback-driven league, and so you have to be able to have a smart quarterback who knows how to handle the stress and the quickness, the speed of the NFL. And so it's very difficult to find a quarterback like that in the NFL. Most of the times, you're going to find a quarterback who is going to be decent. You're going to find quarterbacks who can be franchise quarterbacks, but maybe not elite quarterbacks. I think there's a difference. I don't think they're one and the same. I think you could have elite quarterbacks. I think you have a franchise quarterback. And I think you can have good quarterbacks who can be starters, but not necessarily great quarterbacks, maybe more of a game manager, which can be okay as well, because if you have all the other pieces, blue chip type of players that are surrounding your quarterback, then a lot of times that can really help to hide some of the deficiencies that you may have at that position. But make no mind on that. The quarterback has to be one of the most important positions on the offense. And so from there, I would say a good running game as well. Because no matter what, I know this is a quarterback-driven league, but that doesn't mean that you completely ignore running back. Now, running backs don't have the longevity in the NFL like they did before, but you still have to have a good, solid run game. And so I think the running back position is the next that's very important, because you got to establish the run. Even if you're a pass-first offense, you got to establish that threat to run, because if you can't establish that, your offense is going to be completely one-dimensional, and pretty soon defenses can figure that out, and if they see that you're one-dimensional, it's going to be easy for them to just rush you all of the time and drop people back in coverage and things like that. So you got to be able to have a good running game. You can either have a fullback on your team that is someone who's going to either block for your running back or is going to be the one who gets the ball sometimes as well. But you don't see the fullback in today's NFL as much, because you're having the quarterback being in the pistol formation a lot. And so there's not really a lot of room, not really a lot of chances for a fullback in today's NFL as much as what it used to be. You still see a fullback occasionally, but not very often. So nowadays, it's more like your tailbacks. And, they'll come in and they'll be beside of the quarterback in a pistol, or maybe right behind him for an option handoff or something like that. But I think running is still a very important thing in today's NFL. So that's why I feel like a good running back, usually 3 good running backs, a first down back, and then a second down back, and a third down back. And then you're pretty good with that. Wide receivers, definitely. In today's NFL, I think a good tall wide receiver who's fast. Kind of mix it up. You can have a good tall wide receiver that could be a possession type of guy. Someone that you can really target when you're in the red zone. Someone you can throw fades to. And then maybe a guy who's the speedy guy who's going to stretch the field and open things up underneath. And then, of course, your slot receivers and things like that. But I always feel three good receivers. Back in the 80s, we had the posse, the later half of the 80s and early 90s, it was Art Montgomery Clark, Ricky Sanders. And then later on, just a few years ago, we had Pierre Garçon, we had Deshaun Jackson, and we had Jamison Crowder. And I thought that was a pretty good trio of wide receivers. And so I think three good receivers. You always need three. Actually, you usually keep, about 5 or 6 receivers. But you're usually going to start about 3. And so having 3 good wide receivers on your offense, depending on certainly what style of offense you're going to be playing. Because a lot of times you may just be in a 2 wide receiver set. But basically, that's how I build. I build from the inside out. Now, we can start discussing what type of offenses are better than others. And that will actually be a pretty interesting topic to cover in some videos in the off season, is to discuss the different types of offensive philosophies and which ones that we feel are better than the others. Certainly in the NFL and even in college, offenses have evolved so much. I mean, now, obviously we're seeing the quarterback position evolving to the point where you almost need a dual threat quarterback. And especially in the NFL, we're starting to see that now as well, with option plays and things like that. We used to not see that as much. It was very gimmicky back in the day. Now it's like everybody runs it. I remember back in 2012 when we instituted that for Robert Griffin III, and we, Shanahan ran that very well with RG3. And I mean, we were getting teams on that like crazy, and people were talking about they're going to figure this out, and this is just a gimmick. And, the NFL being the copycat league like it is, everybody's running it now. So it's like this, it's kind of the base thing that everybody runs. And so nowadays, just about every team is exclusively in a shotgun or pistol formation. Even if they're going to be a run first, they're in the pistol formation, shotgun formation, they hand off to the running back. So I know that the run and shoot guys like Warren Moon nowadays would look at that and smile, because that's what they had back in the 80s. So anyway, that's how I kind of look at building an NFL franchise. Let me know in the comments what you think. Now, this is pure my opinion. I've never built an NFL franchise. I'm just a fan. So you can take this and, say whatever. You just wasted 23 minutes of my life hearing you ramble on. But I just feel like that's how you build. I don't feel like that you necessarily draft a quarterback first unless you feel like that you're going to maybe sit that quarterback for a year or so while you start a stopgap quarterback. And in that case, I can see going ahead and grabbing that sure thing quarterback, and then maybe also building up that offensive line and seeing if you have a good stable offensive line for the next season. At that point, I think then I could see grabbing that quarterback. But I don't necessarily see grabbing that quarterback and then throwing him into the fire that first year knowing that you have nothing on the offensive line. I think you're just really spelling a year of disaster and possibly breaking that quarterback. I mean, just look at Bryce Young there in Carolina. I think that's what happened to him in Carolina this year. And so I just think that if you do draft a quarterback in the first round, then you either already have the pieces around him, especially on the offensive line, or you're drafting him and you're planning on sitting him for a first year while you build out some of these other positions to get him ready to succeed. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.